Hey guys, welcome to another episode of our mini interview series. And for today's episode, we're going to talk about copywriting with one of the best copywriters I know, actually. A close friend of mine, Noah. But instead of me doing all the introduction, Noah, how about you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, totally. First off, thank you, Wesley. I'm so happy to be here and to talk to you a little bit about copywriting. My background, first and foremost, I'm the owner and founder of leadgrowth.io. We help commercial service clients find and get their most ideal prospects. So that is what I'm currently working on every single day. But kind of background for me, I have been in the lead generation space for about 2.5 years. I first was working with an agency and really just kind of came from a sales background. I was a closer for some time too, and had always worked in the sales space. And then at one point in time, about a year into working there, we had a little bit of an issue with lead flow. And so I took it upon myself to send some emails. I was first and foremost sending like manual emails out all the time.
Mhm.
And then eventually found this guy that was able to connect Wesley and I and started to automate some emails and started doing the actual cold email route. And so from there, that started a long journey. I was able to get some really good results for them, then decided to have that conversation to go and start my own agency, sign some clients, and about a year and a half later, here we are.
Yeah, that's a great story, man. Yeah, we actually met at an agency accelerator, and I actually didn't know that you had another sales job before you started your own agency. So, talk to me a little bit about that, and how did you actually transition from your sales job into like cold email copywriting?
Yeah, man, such a great question. So first, like the first ever sales job that I had was I was in still at university. I went to San Diego State. It's actually where I'm here right now. I'm in a hotel going to go visit some of my friends sometime soon. But back in I think it was 2018 or 2019, I took a sales job where I was selling like spring break trips for kids at San Diego State, and then I did really well my first year. And so my second year, when I was a sophomore, they asked me to be the manager for the school, like sales manager, and that was crazy. It was like basically a little bit of entrepreneurship. I was running a business inside of their business, so I just basically owned all of San Diego State, and then I was able to build out a team of like 36 people,
Wow.
600,000 in revenue in 9 months, and then from there, just kind of realized, okay, like sales is definitely something that I can leverage at least. So then long story short, I had like a bunch of different jobs in between then. When I was in school, I had internships and all that type of stuff too. Wanted to really go the marketing route and got a job in data analytics and e-commerce. Then from there, I just kind of wasn't exactly where I wanted to go. So I kind of went back to sales. And then after I had a sales role for, like I was telling you at that company, I was there for about a year and I had about a half a year as well at another company before that. And at the time, I just knew that I wanted to be my own, like I wanted to have my own business. I had a few that started up and failed along the way. But then when I realized like this is a mechanism that works and I've been able to get it to work inside of this business and I saw all the revenue that I drove for them, I was like, I know I can do this for myself. And I thought this was my ticket to really be the entrepreneur that I always wanted to be and to be a business owner. And yeah, that was kind of the transition. It was like it's by far one of the best decisions of my life. First, just pulling the trigger to go and sign some of my own clients, and then also to join that agency accelerator too, and really just get my feet on the ground and start going.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing your story. I'll kind of transition into cold email copywriting now. And one thing that I hear people talk a lot nowadays is that cold email has gone so noisy. So, what most people don't realize is that like cold email at the end of the day, it just sales, right? It's just a funnel within the sales funnel. So, how do you think sales can translate into cold email copywriting? Like, especially when it comes to cold email. What are some sales strategy that can help break the noise?
Such a great question. So it always comes back down to sales for me. So you kind of have to sell the email itself. And the first way that you do that is, of course, in the subject line. And then secondly is the first line. So when I'm trying to stand out in the inboxes, and of course, it depends a little bit about the industry that you're in and who you're really targeting. But to stand out in any sort of inbox, you want to break the noise and to kind of have a little bit of a pattern interrupt. So things that have worked historically really well is saying something like quick question or question for first name and have that slight personalization in there. And although that still holds true in some industries, I'm not going to, diminish that by any means. Sometimes you need to have a little bit more of like a real call out. So the best way that I kind of think of it is to have a subject line where you're almost teasing the email itself, and just having it in a sense where I always try to make it under 4 words. I rarely ever go more than 4 words. And then it also, like I said, it just kind of tempts inside of the email. So sometimes a question mark to cut through the noise and to break that kind of pattern in general. I usually use all lowercase letters. And then from there, it just trying to tease something. So like at one point in time, we were targeting ecom brands and we went from quick question, which is just kind of old reliable. You just kind of use it almost all the first testing emails, to it's been a while. And it was because we were referencing that their product photos had been 2 years old, 3 years old, however long, and we went like for a 4x increase in response rates right off the bat. That was the only thing we changed. So it was for sure something. It was like it's been a while, and that person receiving it was probably like, damn, is this a friend of mine? Is this an old colleague or something? So at least it got a rate.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, man. I mean, again, cold email at the end of the day is just a funnel, right? The subject line sell the click sells the body sells the CTA, so on and so forth, right? So thanks for sharing some of the strategy on subject line. And like most people actually overlook the subject line a lot too. But that's living proof, right? That it can actually make or break your campaign. So now let's say that you've got like a perfect subject line and you're moving on into the body. Does it matter how long your cold email should be? Because I'm hearing different things. Like some people would prefer a longer and more informative emails, and some actually prefer like the shorter ones. So what are your thoughts on that? Should they stick to a longer with more information or a shorter email?
Yeah, another great question. It's in general, I aid to stay on the shorter side of things, but I will say I did a copy review on my own YouTube channel last week about our one of our highest performing campaigns, and it was 209 words long. So
Wow.
it was kind of a mix of exactly what you said, just kind of falling down and just it being a funnel itself and just effortlessly falling down the page, but also just kind of provoking some questions. So like the first part of it was asking about, a guy where the question mark was the subject line. And from there it went into, and this was really targeted to people in the Boston area. So Bostonians, it's almost like an inside joke. And I just had a long email that was kind of like a story time, but it also showed, direct, like relating to pain points. It in the first line, in the second line, it identified a problem. In the third line, it gave a solution. And then it was just a fantastic offer. So what I try to do in general is just those four components of the email. Now, if you can make it shorter and compact and you can just get straight to the point and you can show people value, that's typically the best because as you know, every person, time is limited, and how much time you spend inside of a email, I think it gets lower and lower by the day. So that's kind of my thought there.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So essentially, when in doubt, keep it short, unless you know exactly how to keep the audience engaged, right? And I guess one thing I noticed too is that you can't really please everyone. Like some like to read longer, some like to read shorter ones, and you just cannot really write a cold email that works for everybody. So your best bet is just do what you're most comfortable with, right? And do what you're good at, right? But there are still things that you should not leave out, right? Like important variables in a cold email, because you're still trying to get people to get invested into your product or like buying your service. Right? So can you touch base on what are some of the must-have variables, like regardless of how long or short your email is?
Must have. So I would definitely say making sure that you can show solution or some sort of unique mechanism. So I guess in general, the most important thing is having a great offer. And
Mm,
we've talked about that many times with just painkiller offers. So something that you really, really need versus like a vitamin offer. It's something that just kind of nice. And a lot of the times what works is identifying triggers and using really complex workflows in Clay, so on and so forth. But just straight up have something that people really need, I would say number one, that's first and foremost. So if you're watching this and you're selling for your own agency or for your own product or in service, or you're an agency owner looking to go out and sign new clients, make sure that it's an offer that people need first and foremost. Second would be this AIDA framework, or AIDA. It's like
Mm,
120 years old, but it's something that is still used in marketing for a reason. And I think it's one of those building blocks. And it's basically attention, interest, desire, and action. And
mm,
this, it kind of falls perfectly with an email. So attention, you get them from the subject line or first line. Interest, you're able to show some sort of solution to a problem. Desire, you have a desired outcome. So a lot of times that's the case study. That's something that you leverage. That you show social proof in the niche, or that you've worked with a competitor, or maybe someone, like a company that's very similar to theirs. And then at the end with action, it's of course the call to action, and just having
mm.
something that's desirable in general. So that's the framework that I'll always use. And I guess just a good rule of thumb from that is just when you're reading it, is it something that you want to read? Like a
Mm,
lot of the times I'll
yeah.
come back to it and I'm like, okay, would Wesley want to read this? Or would I want to read this? Or, if I was to write this and to send it out to someone who is, like 21 fresh out of school, are they going to want to read this? Or is a CEO that's, 30 years in the game also interested enough to read this? And a lot of the times I just try to think of different personas, of course, depending on who you're reaching out to. But a good general rule of thumb is, do I enjoy reading this?
Yeah, yeah, I love that. That's a really solid advice, and it's funny because I also tell my team the same thing. Like I always tell them to like, hey, pull up the copy on your phone and just walk around the house, read it over, and ask yourself like, is this something you would say to the friend, right? And if the answer is no, then it's probably not a good copy. Like it's got to be conversational, right? Because again, like going back to the idea that cold email is a part of sales, but here's the thing, people hate being sold to. And that's a fact, right? People love to buy, but they hate being sold to. So you've got to make sure that your email is less salesy and more on the conversational side. And I guess, like, speaking of that, what do you think should be like the tone in your cold email? Should it be formal or should it be informal? Like, especially if you're talking to like a CEO of enterprises. What are your thoughts on that?
This is something that gets brought up often too, but I really love the informal kind of way of going
Mm.
about it. And I'm not saying informal is go out to the enterprise CEO and be like, "Yo, what's up, dude?" Something like that. But yeah, what's going on, Doug? But more or less, again, just kind of beating that pattern. I think a lot of people inside of big businesses and organizations are going to get a ton of emails daily that are like, as per my last email, or like some sort of sophisticated type of language. That just, when I read those, it just goes straight over my head because
Mm,
one, we don't talk like that in person. So I'm not using language that I would typically use, whether I was talking to a friend, like if you and I were having a conversation, or I was to even talk to a coworker. Like a lot of the
mm,
times, even with professional relationships, the actual conversation back and forth is pretty lax. So what I like to do is more or less just kind of again go back and read it. Like, would I actually say this? Yes or no? Okay. And then you can kind of make your decision from there. But also, like a few months ago, people were really using like a lot of jokes and kind of witty humor, and I have done that as well. And a lot of the times, I would say at least test it, because sometimes people like to get jokes and whatever. So you'll definitely run into people that are like, "Oh, screw off!" Like I ran a
yeah.
campaign centered around cheese, and it was funny. One of the hardest responses I got back ended up being a client, because he was like, he was like, "Oh man, this is the cheesiest of the cheese. You deserve to be in the cheese aisle or something." And then I was able to just kind of disengage him and come back and be like, "Hey man, like, yeah, I won't even get into it, but it was more or less, it's funny because you'll get some interesting responses back. But I would just say, don't be afraid to go out, be
Yeah, that's actually pretty funny. So you actually did a campaign talking about cheese. So I guess like talk to me a bit about that cheese campaign. Like, I'm pretty sure some of the audience are interested to learn about it too.
Yeah, I guess high level of it, I was talking about, so I guess regular, or not formal, because obviously, like I was saying before, I'm pretty informal, but there are some kind of language patterns that you tend to go back to in email. And I was doing a cheese themed email. So basically, what it was is every time, so for instance, in the case study section of it, when I was talking about the example or solution, I would say, and this is running for my own campaign, so for my own agency going out to get clients, and I was basically saying, in terms of cheese, we were able to grade 21 blocks of cheddar in 45 days for our clients, which resulted in him getting the cream of the crop. So it was more or less like all the all the actionable points. I just related it back to cheese and these like different cheese names like Gouda. Oh, it was like we created like a bunch of blocks of cheese for him to have Gouda results, and
Yeah, that's so funny. So you basically replay revenue with like cheese and say something like you've gotten 2 pounds of cheese for your client.
exactly.
It just goes back to like pattern interruption, right? Like I'm sure CEO and higher executive like get tons of emails today, pitch after pitch, and now all of a sudden they get an email about cheese. um, I'm sure about like 10 of them will get angry if they're having a bad day, but like that's something you actually cannot avoid anyways. And outside of those 10 people, you can probably land about one or two clients like Noah did, right? Just because you're different than everyone else. And that's exactly how you break away from the noise, just being different, right? Yeah, I mean, I love that. I love that. So thank you for sharing that story about that cheese campaign. Now, in terms of like sales psychology, what are some of your favorite ways to incorporate psychology into cold email copywriting?
I love psychology. It's like it's definitely one of the things that I study aside from all kind of business theory and all that. And it really, really works, especially with marketing and just trying to understand people and kind of having, you know, meaningful relationships and connections with people too. So I would suggest everyone to go and do so. There's obviously there's millions of books, but the person frameworks that I tend to go back to is, of course, the Cialdini seven principles. I went to one of his conferences in Arizona this summer in May, and it was the 40th year of it. So as you can tell, like a lot of these ones, 40 years, 120 years, like they hold up for a reason. And inside of cold email, I like using the Cialdini principles. So it's like commitments, social proof, authority, um, reciprocity, liking, scarcity, unity. So these ones are all they can be used in cold email. I think it's hard to use seven all at once, but if you put in two or three of them and you give something like reciprocity, you're giving a lead magnet. So maybe it's a PDF and you're able to go out and show someone, like for instance, we're working with a company that is using PDFs and kind of like AI lead magnets for their
Mm,
e-commerce clients. So we're going out and we're giving them PDFs on exactly how to build out what they do truly. So it's like a huge document that gives out a ton of information and basically just all the value of their service without showing them behind the scenes or the secret sauce or whatever you may say.
mm,
But from there, getting a ton of interested replies. A lot of them do book in, whether it's to just learn about what's going on or because they want someone to do it for them. So that's a great example of using reciprocity, is just going out and giving some lead magnets. When it's authority, it's, of course you can say like worked with hundreds of business owners to help
mm,
them lower their cost of acquisition, or social proof is just showing some case studies, and scarcity if it's like if you actually have something that you can only work with a certain amount of people, or maybe there's a deadline and it's Black Friday and you have a deal or something like that, then that works. But you got to be careful with some of these too. It's like scarcity, you don't want to, people can sniff out false scarcity, and that, so you use it truthfully, use it honorably. And the thing that I love about Cialdini too is that it's all about ethics. So you have
yeah.
to ethically market the right way. Like anyone can put on a scam and just be like, yeah, this is, you can have $100 million in the next year or money back and all this stuff. We only accept three people, and all of it can be fake, and you're just a phony. So you have to kind of have the balance, or make it black and white that you are ethical in what you're doing. But
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you gotta know what you're talking about, right? Like, can't just make false claim. Would you mind if I share one of my favorite sales psychology? So I actually learned this when I was working at Apple, but every time you go to the Apple store, you notice that they tilt their laptop at like a certain angle to make it annoying for you. And the purpose of that is so that you can make they make the buyer to touch and adjust the laptop to the right angle that's more comfortable. So study actually found that consumers who touch the computer, they are more likely to buy it just simply because they touch the product. Like, isn't that crazy? So same thing with cold email. I try to apply that same psychology, and the way I'm trying to do it is just to get the conversation going. Like, I don't try to sell the product right off the bat. Leave the selling to the sales team. Just get the conversation going in your cold email. And the more they interact with, your email, the more likely they actually gonna go into your funnel. Like, the more likely they're gonna buy your product. So yeah, that's one of my favorite sales psychology that I learned
Yeah,
back at
man,
Apple.
thank you for sharing that. I know that's super valuable to me, so I know the audience will also appreciate that. But I always love when you share some little tidbits like.
Yeah, of course, of course. Okay, so one last important thing in the cold email is your CTA. So, what is a good call to action that can actually drive people to the next step? What you should be focusing on when drafting your CTA?
So I for CTAs, they it kind of comes up and down. It's not something that trends very like it's not something that and one day people are like, oh yeah, let's get on a call, or the next day people just want information. But I think the best way to do it is to again be fairly casual but also disengaging, so not just going out and kind of like you're saying, like go for the sale immediately. Like you don't want to
Mm,
per se to people, let's jump on a call, or what time is good for you, or something like that. That's great in follow-ups and when people show some interest, but I typically try to stay clear of just going and straight up asking for the meeting at first. A lot of the times I'll just say like, if you like, would you want us to send more information, or would you want more info on this, or could I share a PDF that goes over how we do so, or maybe a pre-recorded demo or something of the sort. Because there's different schools of thought on this too. Because sometimes you'll just simply get tire kickers and people that are here basically just being like, yeah, I'm interested, show send me proof or whatever, and then they're complete ghosts. But my thought is that they're probably not gonna go for a meeting anyways. So at least you have someone in the pipeline and you can send them a nurture sequence, or if you have newsletters, you add them to a newsletter, something of the sort, so that you're able to continue just capturing eyes. And when you're able to do that, then you put them into, like, kind of like I said, that your own nurture sequence, your own funnel to get them into a call. So I would just say keep it pretty pretty relaxed, but also just showing however you can get some value to them.
yeah, yeah, I agree with you. So to keep the CTA soft, like not very pushy or salesy or anything like that. And yeah, no, I agree with you. Like people like to think cold email as like a vehicle to sell, but it's not. It's a marketing channel. And that could be a good thing too. Like let's say you send a lead magnet or like more informations about the product or the service that you're doing, and let's say the prospect don't like it, well, that basically means one of the two, right? It means that they might not need the solution right now, so you're saving some time for the sales team, right? Or number two, like your lead magnet just sucks. It go back and fix it. It's a great feedback. So I am 100% with you there. Okay. So unfortunately, that's all the time that we have today. Thank you so much, Noah, for your time, and really appreciate you for sharing your knowledge about copywriting. And I had a really fun discussion with you. I hope all the audience learned a thing or two from Noah, because I learned a ton from the sessions. So once again, I appreciate you for doing this call today with me.
Absolutely. So always so happy to speak with you, Wesley. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. All right. Have a good one, you guys.